Imagine standing on a windswept hill, the clash of steel ringing in your ears, the fate of nations hanging in the balance. What if a single day could redraw the map of Europe? What if the courage of a few could alter history for centuries? Today, we're diving into the epic battles that didn't just shape medieval Europe. They forged the world we know now. From blood-soaked fields to defiant stands, these are the moments where empires rose and fell. Stick with me because by the end, you'll see why these conflicts still echo in our lives today. Let's step into the chaos and uncover the stories that changed everything. Picture Europe in the early medieval period, a patchwork of tribes, kingdoms, and ambitions. No centralized power, no unified identity. Just raw, unrelenting struggle. Battles weren't just fights. They were turning points that decided who would rule, who would survive, and what ideas would endure. I've always been fascinated by how these moments, often decided in hours, could ripple across centuries. Growing up in the US, I'd read about castles and knights, but it wasn't until I visited Europe, walking the fields of Normandy, standing where history was made, that I felt the weight of these events. Today I'm sharing that journey with you, blending hard facts with the human stories that make these battles unforgettable. Let's start with one of the most pivotal clashes in history, the Battle of Tours in 732. Charles Martel, a Frankish leader, faced an Umayyad army pushing into Western Europe from Spain. The stakes? Nothing less than the survival of Christian Europe. The Umayyads had already conquered much of the Iberian Peninsula, and their cavalry was legendary. Fast, disciplined, and terrifying. Martel, though, wasn't just a warrior. He was a strategist. He chose a forested hill near Tours, forcing the Umayyad cavalry into tight, unfamiliar terrain. His men, mostly infantry, formed a shield wall, standing firm against wave after wave of attacks. After days of brutal fighting, Martel's forces broke the Umayyad advance, killing their commander Abdul Rahman. The invaders retreated, never again pushing so far into Europe. Why does Tours matter? Historians like Edward Gibbon argued it stopped the spread of Islam into Western Europe, preserving a Christian-dominated culture. Without Martel's victory, the cathedrals of Paris, the universities of Oxford, even the Renaissance might not exist as we know them. But let's be real. Standing on that hill, Martel wasn't thinking about the Renaissance. He was fighting for survival. His men, outnumbered, faced a foe that seemed unstoppable. Yet they held. That grit, that refusal to break, is what makes Tours a cornerstone of European identity. It's not just a battle. It's a story of defiance that resonates whether you're in New York or London. Now, let's fast forward to 1066, to a muddy field in southern England. The Battle of Hastings is the kind of clash that feels like it was scripted by Hollywood. William the Conqueror, a Norman duke, claimed the English throne after King Edward's death, but Harold Godwinson, crowned king, wasn't about to hand it over. On October 14, 1066, their armies met near Hastings. William's forces, knights, archers, and infantry, faced Harold's shield wall of Anglo-Saxon warriors. The Normans struck first, but Harold's men held the high ground, repelling attack after attack. Hours passed, men fell, and exhaustion set in. Then William pulled a risky move. He faked a retreat. Harold's men, thinking victory was theirs, broke formation to pursue. William's cavalry wheeled around, cutting them down. Harold, legend says, took an arrow to the eye, and his army collapsed. Hastings didn't just crown William. It reshaped England. Norman rule brought castles, feudalism, and a new elite. The English language absorbed French words, think justice or government. Even today, when you visit the Tower of London, you're walking in William's shadow. For Americans, this battle hits home because it's part of the story that led to the Magna Carta, a document that inspired the U.S. Constitution. But what gets me is the human cost. Thousands died in a single day, ordinary men caught in a power struggle. Standing at Battle Abbey where the clash happened, you can almost hear the cries of the fallen. It's humbling to think how one day's chaos could change a nation's destiny. Let's shift gears to 1346, to the Battle of Crécy during the 100 Years' War. England's King Edward III faced a massive French army in northern France. The French had more men, better armor, and home field advantage, but Edward had a secret weapon, the longbow. His archers, trained from childhood, could fire arrows that pierced armor at 200 yards. On a rainy August day, the French knights charged, their crossbows outmatched and their cavalry bogged in mud. Edward's longbowmen unleashed a storm of arrows, some say 700,000 in the battle. The French fell in droves, including thousands of nobles. By nightfall, Edward's smaller army had crushed the French, proving that strategy and technology could trump numbers. Crécy was a game-changer. It showed that knights, the medieval superstars, weren't invincible. The longbow became England's trump card, shaping battles for decades. For European audiences, Crécy is a reminder of how innovation can shift power. For Americans, it's a lesson in underdog victories. Think David versus Goliath. What strikes me is the sheer scale of loss. The French nobility was decimated, leaving villages without leaders. Yet in that chaos, a new kind of warfare was born. It's a stark reminder that progress often comes at a brutal cost. Now let's leap to 1415, to the muddy fields of Agincourt. King Henry V of England, outnumbered and exhausted, faced a French army 5 times his size. His men were sick, starving, and far from home. The French, confident, expected an easy win. But Henry, like Martel centuries before, was a master of terrain. He positioned his army in a narrow field flanked by woods, funneling the French into a trap. On October 25th, his longbowmen struck first, their arrows cutting through French armor. The French knights, weighed down by heavy plate and stuck in mud, couldn't maneuver. Henry's men-at-arms moved in, turning the battle into a slaughter. By day's end, the French were broken, and Henry was a legend. Agincourt is iconic thanks partly to Shakespeare's Band of Brothers speech. For Europeans, it's a tale of national pride, English resilience, or French overconfidence, depending on your side. For Americans, it's the ultimate underdog story, a scrappy force beating the odds. Data backs this up. Henry's army, perhaps 6,000 strong, defeated a French force of 20,000, 30,000. But what hits me is Henry's gamble. He wasn't just fighting for land. He was fighting to prove his legitimacy as king. Every man on that field, from archer to knight, was part of a desperate bid for survival. Visiting Agincourt today, you can still feel the weight of their sacrifice. These battles, Tours, Hastings, Crécy, Agincourt, weren't just fights, they were crucibles. They forged nations, cultures, and ideas. Tours preserved a Christian Europe. Hastings birthed a New England. Crécy and Agincourt showed that brains and adaptability could outmatch brawn. Together they laid the foundations for modern Europe, from the rule of law to the rise of nation-states. But let's zoom out. Why do these stories grip us? Because they're not just about kings or armies, they're about people. The soldier at Tours clutching his shield, wondering if he'd see his family again. The archer at Agincourt praying his aim stayed true. These were ordinary folks caught in extraordinary moments. As an American, I see these battles through a lens of legacy. The Magna Carta, born from Norman England, inspired the principles of liberty and the U.S. Constitution. The resilience at Agincourt echoes in stories of American underdogs, from the Revolution to today. For Europeans, these battles are closer to home, part of your national DNA. Whether you're in France, England, or Germany, your history was shaped by these clashes. That's why I love sharing these stories. They're not just dusty facts, they're the roots of who we are. Let's talk about what made these battles so decisive. Terrain was huge. Think Martel's Hill at Tours or Henry's narrow field at Agincourt. Leaders like William and Edward used strategy over brute force, proving that brains beat brawn. Technology, too, Crécy's longbow or Hastings' cavalry tactics, shifted the game. But the real X factor, people, soldiers, often untrained, faced death for causes they barely understood. Their courage, their fear, their sacrifice, these are the threads that weave history together. Now, I want to share a personal take. Walking these battlefields from Hastings to Agincourt changed how I see history. It's not just dates or names, it's human. At Crécy, I stood where French knights fell, imagining their final moments. At Tours, I felt the weight of Martel's choice, stand or lose everything. These places aren't just fields, they're time machines. If you ever get the chance, visit them. Walk the ground, feel the history. It'll hit you differently than any book or documentary. Let's wrap this up with a question. What can we learn from these battles? First, resilience. Every leader, from Martel to Henry, faced impossible odds but found a way. Second, adaptability. The longbow, the shield wall, these were game changers because someone dared to innovate. Third, unity. These battles weren't won by one hero but by groups of people, from peasants to knights working together. In our world, divided, chaotic, these lessons feel more relevant than ever. Whether you're chasing a dream or facing a challenge, channel that medieval grit. Stand your ground, adapt, unite. Before we go, I want to hear from you. Which battle hit you the hardest? Tours' defiance, Hastings' drama, Agincourt's underdog? Vibe? Drop a comment and let's geek out over history together. If you love this dive into medieval mayhem, hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share this with more history nerds like us. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. We've got more epic stories coming your way. Speaking of what's next, you won't want to miss our deep dive into one of history's darkest chapters. Ever wondered how a single disease reshaped medieval Europe? Check out our next video, Mysteries of the Black Death Solved, Medieval Plagues. It's a wild ride, and trust me, you'll be shocked by what we uncover. See you there.